Whoa, I'm down. Hey, look. It's almost high.
Hey friends, welcome back on our second day of Cranial Awareness Month, where today we are going to be answering the question, Craniosynostosis has not personally affected me. What do I need to know?
Well, I guess the first place to start is that it strongly affects the entire family. You're talking about babies. Most of them are less than 6 months old, and they are literally being asked to hand over their child to a surgeon who will cut their head open for a couple of hours. And it's not to be graphic or frightening, but just that is what young new parents are going through because of this diagnosis. And so as somebody on the outside looking in, just to be aware that this isn't something to take lightly. This is something that will cut deep into the core of parents very quickly, something that they're very passionate about, because we are talking about children, their babies, their newborn babies. Just to be as strong of a support as you can, in the same way that we are supportive of new mothers, bringing meals and bringing, just letting the families know that they're not alone and that they are surrounded by people who are willing to carry some of the burden with them. And I think that's incredibly important to remind families that they're not alone.
I think another really big thing is, as Katie mentioned, this involves a lot of children. And one of the things that I recall as we were going through the very early stage of this journey with Zoe was there was a lot of people who were very timid around Zoe and not sure what to do. That's completely understandable. We get it. I think all Cranio parents get it, because we're talking, like Katie said, about a child, about their skull. But it means so much to at least us and many of the other Cranio parents that we know. If you just hold the baby and love on them, there's something to be said about willing to make that personal connection with the child and taking that time and taking that moment that makes us as parents feel so much better about the entire situation, just to see someone else love on our child. And we've been so blessed and so graced to have a very amazing network of friends that knew us long before Zoe was even on her way, that quickly embraced and adopted the fact that Zoe is one of their kids too. And she's been showered upon, and it's been amazing. But we've also seen situations with other friends of ours that's not necessarily the case. There's always the at an arm's distance. So it's important to know, now that you're learning more about craniosynostosis and what it is, that it's something to be very cautious about. It's something that you may want to help that family be an advocate about, but it's also just as important just to love that baby with everything that you've got.
And yes, and along that vein, there are a lot of conditions out there that results in having medically fragile babies. When it comes to Cranio, what I have noticed in Zoe and in the vast majority of Cranio babies is they are built strong. They are incredibly strong kids, and fusion actually means that their skull is more protected than a typical baby. And so when you think about a newborn, maybe even in the NICU, these aren't really fragile kids. These are strong kids who can be loved on and can, they can take a hug, they can take a hold from somebody who maybe doesn't know exactly the way that they want to be held. They're really resilient kids, and so I feel like when you hear the word craniosynostosis, yes, there's a seriousness to it, but there's also, this kid is a strong kid, and it's a little. I think it's a little bit easier once you understand what the diagnosis means, to say, they're not going to break in front of me, and just to be aware of that. You can hold the baby, and I promise there won't be anything that happens that would happen to any medically typical child.
Just because you haven't heard the word cranio doesn't mean that you haven't had it impact your life in some way, shape, or form. We had never heard the word craniosynostosis before Zoe was born.
Right.
And even then, it was after about the first 5 hours of her life before we actually heard the word. And it sent our minds reeling. You know, we're both educated in science involving biology. I've worked in the medical field for a while, and I had never heard the term. But now that we have entered this particular world and we've pierced through that veil that usually exists around the world of craniosynostosis and their families, we were shocked to know all the ways that it had already been in our lives. We just never saw it. If you just close your eyes and think for a minute, if you have seen a child with a helmet on their head, nowadays they're actually pretty awesome. They're getting decorated and they're getting painted, which is a really cool movement to do. There's a very high likelihood that child actually has craniosynostosis. If they don't have craniosynostosis, they probably have positional plagiocephaly, which is usually monitored by the same team. So a really staggering statistic that we came across really early on when it involves craniosynostosis is that in the United States, about 1 in every 2,000 live births, the child is diagnosed with craniosynostosis somewhere between birth and the first 2 years of life. There's a lot of reasons why the diagnosis may come later. It's all based on how the child's developing, and a lot of other things that are just online that we're not going to get into in this video in particular. There's a lot of syndromes that mask craniosynostosis, and there's also ones that mimic it as well. So a lot of times there's a lot of back and forth. So when you are sitting here and learning more and more about craniosynostosis, you're actually doing yourself a huge service, and you don't know how that's going to impact a family down the line. You don't know that some family down the line may be hearing this word for the first time, and just because you watched some little video on YouTube, you learned a little bit more, and you may be able to sit there and commiserate with them and let them know that you're there and you can help be that advocate that maybe they desperately need.
And if you are interested in learning more, please check out our website at craniofamilyblog.com. We have a few more videos and some more information on the topic if you want to learn more about craniosynostosis. And tune in next time for future questions for the month of cranial awareness in September.